grand hotel ballroom shimmered with light. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a warm glow across the room. The tables were set with fine china, polished silverware, and elegant floral arrangements. The soft hum of conversations filled the air, a mix of laughter, polite nods, and the occasional clink of glasses. Guests dressed in their finest gowns and suits moved through the room, exchanging greetings and compliments, while servers quietly passed trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Everyone was waiting for the evening to unfold in the usual way. This was a corporate party held annually by the CEO of one of the city's most successful companies. People expected a night of networking, casual chatting, and a few speeches praising the year's accomplishments. But tonight, something unusual was about to happen, and no one knew it yet. The doors at the entrance of the ballroom opened, and a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned toward the CEO, who entered with a confident stride. He looked composed, wearing a classic black tuxedo. There was a sense of expectation as he scanned the room, nodding politely to those he recognized. Then, beside him came a young woman. She walked with a gentle poise, her steps measured and careful. She was dressed simply yet elegantly, not trying to draw attention with flashy colors or heavy jewelry. Her quiet demeanor made her stand out in a room full of confident, socially seasoned guests. Whispers started almost immediately. People leaned toward each other, trying to catch a glimpse and share guesses. Who was she? A relative, perhaps? Or someone important to the CEO's business? Everyone had a different theory, but no one knew the truth. She didn't speak much, offering only a polite smile to those who glanced at her. Her eyes held a calmness, a softness that made her seem approachable and sincere. It was different from the usual charisma people wore at such events, and it intrigued everyone. The CEO guided her to a corner of the room, where she could observe without feeling overwhelmed. He introduced her to a few close associates, keeping the introductions brief. The guests she met were polite but curious, asking questions about her background and connection to the CEO. She answered with simplicity and honesty, never exaggerating her words or trying to impress. There was something refreshing in the way she spoke, a natural ease that contrasted sharply with the often calculated small talk of the party. As the evening progressed, the young woman moved quietly among the guests. She watched as people laughed at jokes, complimented each other, and discussed business deals. She noticed the subtle dynamics in the room, the nods of respect, the slight tensions in conversations, the way some guests tried to appear more important than others. She didn't judge or interfere. She simply observed, learning the rhythm of the gathering. Her quiet presence didn't go unnoticed. Some people found themselves drawn to her calm energy, feeling a sense of peace in her company. Meanwhile, the CEO seemed content. He noticed the subtle attention she was drawing without trying. It was different from the usual spotlight people sought at such events. There was a sense of pride in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement that he had brought someone special. He didn't need to announce it. Her presence spoke for itself. Time passed, and the party began to settle into a comfortable rhythm. Guests sipped champagne, exchanged cards, and moved between conversations. Yet, there was a lingering curiosity about the young woman. People whispered about her, speculated on her story, and wondered what made her so captivating without effort. Some tried to strike up longer conversations, only to find that she listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, her words carried a simplicity and honesty that was unusual in this setting. At one point, a group of senior executives gathered near the piano at the corner of the room. They discussed the evening's entertainment, assuming a professional musician would soon perform. No one suspected that the young woman, the quiet guest, would play a role in the night's unfolding events. She stood nearby, observing them, her hands folded calmly in front of her. There was a light in her eyes, a sense of anticipation she kept to herself, and yet it seemed to radiate outward, unnoticed by most. As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere of polite chatter and casual networking remained, but there was an undercurrent of curiosity. Everyone felt it, though they didn't understand why. The young woman's presence, so understated, had begun to shape the energy of the room. People started to notice small details. The way she listened intently, the gentle nods she offered, the soft smile that never seemed forced. It was a quiet charm, a presence that didn't demand attention but naturally drew it. The CEO returned to his spot near the center of the room, subtly signaling that something was about to happen. The guests looked around, sensing the shift but unsure of its cause. The young woman remained composed, seemingly unaffected by the increasing attention. Yet, there was a tension in the air, a subtle excitement, as if everyone collectively waited for an unknown moment. The whispers grew quieter, replaced by a sense of anticipation. Something different was about to unfold, and even the most experienced partygoers felt it. Conversations slowed, glasses were held a little longer, and the usual flurry of movement reduced. All eyes eventually found themselves drifting toward the young woman, drawn by the quiet aura she carried. The room, filled with voices and laughter just moments ago, began to feel like it was holding its breath. No one knew what was coming, but there was an unspoken understanding that this evening would be remembered for a reason beyond the usual business celebrations. The young woman, standing near the piano, took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the room's attention without letting it overwhelm her. She didn't seek to impress, nor did she feel nervous in the usual sense. There was a calm readiness in her posture, a quiet confidence born from years of dedication to her craft, though none of the guests knew this yet. She simply stood, poised, as if aware that the next moment could change everything for everyone watching. And in that moment, the ballroom, bright and grand, filled with the soft tension of expectation. Conversations paused, laughter faded, and even the chandeliers seemed to reflect a sharper light, catching the eyes of those in the room. The young woman's presence had transformed the atmosphere, making the space feel intimate despite its size. The guests, though unsure why, felt a collective curiosity and anticipation unlike anything they had experienced at previous parties. Something remarkable was about to happen, and the evening's true story was just beginning. The young woman moved quietly through the room, careful not to draw attention but naturally doing so. She observed the conversations and the small gestures, noticing the subtle ways people interacted. Some laughed loudly, trying to impress, while others smiled politely, hiding their insecurities behind a composed face. She noticed the small tensions in the air, the hidden rivalries, and the polite smiles that masked curiosity or doubt. She paused near a table where a group of executives were discussing an upcoming project. They spoke in technical terms, mentioning budgets, deadlines, and strategies. She didn't interrupt but listened quietly, absorbing the way people communicated in such high-pressure environments. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern she understood even though she had never been part of that world directly. She had always admired the dedication and effort people put into their work, even if it seemed tedious or competitive at times. Meanwhile, guests continued to notice her calm presence. Some were drawn by her quiet demeanor, finding it comforting amid the noise and chatter. Others were curious, trying to guess her story. She didn't mind the attention but didn't encourage it either. She moved gently, nodding politely at those who spoke to her, offering small smiles without seeking to dominate conversations. Her humility and calmness were unlike anything most guests had seen at such events. The CEO occasionally glanced toward her, watching her interactions and the effect she had on the room. He didn't need to announce her importance. Her presence spoke volumes. There was a pride in his eyes, not loud or showy, but quiet and deep, knowing he had chosen someone remarkable. People were starting to take notice, sensing that she was more than just a guest. As the evening progressed, a soft murmur of curiosity spread. Guests began whispering to each other, exchanging theories about who she might be. Some thought she could be an accomplished musician, though none had heard her play. Others guessed she might be a distant relative of the CEO or a friend from another city. No one could guess the truth, and that made her presence even more intriguing. Everyone felt there was something special about her, a subtle magnetism that didn't need explanation. The young woman moved closer to the piano, her steps measured and calm. She observed the instrument, noticing its polished surface, the way the keys reflected the chandelier light, and the small details that showed it was well cared for. She didn't rush or touch it yet. She simply stood there, letting herself become familiar with the instrument. The room seemed to slow around her, the usual chatter fading as people unconsciously took notice of her focused presence. Guests who had previously ignored her now found themselves watching, intrigued by her quiet observation. There was an anticipation building, though no one yet knew why. Some tried to speak to her, asking about her background or interests, but she answered gently, with honesty and simplicity. Her words were brief but meaningful, and each interaction added to the sense that she was a thoughtful, grounded person. She didn't brag, she didn't exaggerate, and yet she made a strong impression. A few people who had attended many of these corporate events remarked on how unusual it was to see someone so quietly confident. Usually, guests tried to outshine each other with stories of achievements or flamboyant attire. But here, she moved without seeking recognition, drawing attention simply by being herself. That quiet strength created an energy that the room hadn't felt before. Even the most experienced executives seemed subtly affected, noticing her calmness and the sense of ease she brought into the space. She took a moment to look around, observing the room from different angles. She saw the way people were engaged in their conversations but also catching glimpses of her, the way they whispered and exchanged curious looks. She didn't feel nervous. Instead, there was a quiet excitement building inside her. She had prepared for this night, not for attention, but for the moment when her passion would be shared. She knew the music she carried within her would be the key to touching the hearts of those around her. The CEO approached her briefly, giving a subtle nod and a small smile. It was an unspoken acknowledgement that she was ready, that he trusted her completely. That gesture strengthened her confidence, though she didn't need it. She was calm, focused, and aware of the effect her presence was already having. She understood the subtle dynamics of the room and the expectations of the guests, and she was ready to meet them in her own way. As time passed, the young woman found a quiet corner near the piano where she could prepare herself without distraction. She adjusted her posture, her hands resting lightly in her lap, and took a few deep breaths. She was aware of the growing curiosity in the room but didn't let it overwhelm her. Instead, she allowed herself to become centered, feeling the calm energy that she carried within. The anticipation was shared by everyone around, though no one could yet predict the impact of what was about to happen. The atmosphere in the ballroom began to shift subtly. Conversations slowed, laughter softened, and glasses were held a little longer. People sensed a change but couldn't explain it. The young woman's calm presence had a quiet influence on the room, drawing attention without demanding it. Some guests found themselves reflecting on her composure, wondering how someone so gentle could have such a profound effect. The curiosity was growing, but it was mixed with respect and admiration. Guests who had initially dismissed her presence as insignificant now found themselves observing her more closely. They noticed the small gestures, the way she listened intently, and the subtle expressions on her face. There was a quiet intelligence in her eyes, a depth that suggested thoughtfulness and sensitivity. People began to realize that she was someone who saw the world differently, someone who noticed details others overlooked. That perception made her even more intriguing. At one point, a small group of executives gathered near her, discussing plans for the evening's entertainment. They assumed a professional musician would perform, and they spoke casually about the expected program. The young woman listened quietly, not interrupting, but her focus on the piano was evident. She didn't seek to participate in their discussion. Her attention was elsewhere, on the instrument and the music she would soon play. Yet, even in her silence, she conveyed a quiet presence that made the executives pause and notice her. As the minutes passed, the sense of anticipation in the room continued to build. Guests found themselves drawn to the young woman, curious about what would come next. Even those who had previously ignored her now paid subtle attention, feeling an unexplainable connection to her calm demeanor. There was a shared sense of expectancy, a quiet tension that suggested something remarkable was about to unfold. Everyone felt it, though they couldn't yet articulate why. The young woman remained composed, her posture relaxed but poised. She took another deep breath, centering herself and feeling the weight of the moment. She knew that soon, her actions would speak louder than any words. She didn't need to announce her talent or background. The room would understand in its own way. The calm energy she radiated was preparing the space for what was to come. Guests, whether aware of it or not, were already responding to her presence. As she stood near the piano, she noticed subtle changes in the room's energy. The chatter had softened, and many guests were watching her from a distance. Some leaned slightly forward in their seats, curious and intrigued. Others exchanged glances, recognizing that something different was happening. The young woman's calm confidence had shifted the atmosphere, creating a sense of focus and anticipation that hadn't existed before. The stage was set, and the room seemed ready for the story she was about to tell through her music. The CEO watched from across the room, proud and satisfied. He had known her potential, had seen her dedication and talent, and now he waited for everyone else to witness it. There was a quiet satisfaction in seeing her presence already influence the crowd. He didn't need to announce it. The moment was about to speak for itself. The young woman, aware of the growing curiosity, simply stood quietly, ready for the next step in her journey that evening. And in that soft, expectant moment, the ballroom held its breath. Guests felt the subtle tension, the quiet excitement, and the anticipation of something extraordinary. The young woman, calm and composed, was ready to step forward, not just as a guest, but as someone who would soon capture the hearts of everyone present. The evening's true story was unfolding, and the next chapter was about to begin, carrying the promise of a remarkable and unforgettable moment. The soft murmur of conversations had quieted almost completely as the young woman slowly walked toward the grand piano at the corner of the ballroom. The polished instrument gleamed under the light of the chandeliers, its black and white keys shining in contrast to the golden hues around it. People who had been casually chatting just moments before now turned their attention toward her. There was a sense of expectation in the air, though no one could have anticipated the effect she would have. Her steps were measured, calm, and deliberate. She didn't rush or show nervousness. Despite the curiosity in the room, she moved with quiet confidence, her eyes briefly scanning the faces around her. Some guests tried to hide their surprise, while others openly whispered, wondering if she was truly going to perform. The CEO, standing nearby, gave a subtle nod of encouragement. It was small, almost imperceptible to others, but it was enough for her to feel the quiet support that steadied her even more. As she reached the piano, she paused for a moment to place her hands gently on the keys. The room seemed to hold its breath. Even the servers stopped moving for a brief second, their trays frozen in place as they observed the unfolding scene. It was a rare moment when time seemed to slow, and everyone present felt the shift in energy. Her calm demeanor made the anticipation almost tangible, a delicate tension that filled the air without words. She took a deep breath, letting the quiet expectation wash over her. There was no fear, only a quiet readiness. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, centering herself, and then let her fingers rest lightly on the keys. The guests watched closely, some leaning slightly forward in their chairs or tilting their heads, curious and intrigued. The room was silent except for the faint sound of the chandelier's reflections and the soft shuffle of feet adjusting to get a better view. Then, softly at first, she began to play. The first notes were gentle and careful, like ripples in a still pond. They spread through the room quietly at first, barely noticeable, yet somehow commanding attention. The guests, previously immersed in polite conversations and laughter, turned fully toward her. The music started to create a rhythm, drawing everyone into its flow. Each note seemed deliberate, chosen to touch not just the ears but the emotions of the listeners. Her hands moved gracefully over the keys, each motion smooth and precise. She played not with showiness or the need to impress, but with a sense of purpose and passion that emanated naturally from within her. The audience could feel it, even if they didn't understand the technicalities of music. There was an honesty in the way she expressed herself through the instrument, a sincerity that made each note resonate deeply. It was more than skill. It was emotion, vulnerability, and confidence wrapped together in sound. Guests who had been skeptical or dismissive at first now found themselves leaning closer, unable to look away. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others watched her hands move with fascination. The atmosphere in the room transformed completely. The chatter, laughter, and casual murmurs had faded into a respectful silence, as if everyone understood that something remarkable was happening. Even those who considered themselves indifferent to music couldn't deny the beauty and intensity of the performance. As she continued, the young woman began to incorporate subtle shifts in tempo and dynamics, creating a story with her music. It was not just a melody, but a journey that carried the audience through emotions they had not expected to experience at a corporate party. Some felt a gentle warmth, others a nostalgic sadness, and yet others a sense of awe. Every guest, in their own way, was connected to the music, drawn into a shared experience that transcended the formality of the event. The CEO watched from a short distance, his expression calm but proud. He had seen her practice, knew her talent, and understood the dedication behind every note. But watching her perform in front of a room full of strangers, many of whom were influential and skeptical, was a moment of quiet satisfaction. She was not only demonstrating her skill but also revealing her ability to connect with people on a level that words alone could not reach. The young woman's focus never wavered. She played with precision and emotion, allowing herself to feel the music while remaining aware of the room. She noticed subtle reactions. The way some guests' eyes softened, how others shifted slightly in their seats, leaning toward the piano as if drawn by an invisible force. The connection was mutual, a silent understanding forming between the performer and the audience. She didn't need applause yet. The impact was already being felt. Minutes passed, yet the audience remained spellbound. The performance was neither rushed nor drawn out. It had a natural flow, a rhythm that mirrored human emotion itself. Every pause, every note, was carefully considered, creating moments of tension and release that captivated the listeners. The young woman seemed to exist entirely within the music, her fingers dancing across the keys with both technical mastery and heartfelt expression. Some guests whispered to each other, marveling at her talent and the effect it had on the room. They spoke in hushed tones, careful not to break the spell of the moment. "Who is she?" one asked softly. "How can someone be so humble yet so incredible?" another replied. Even those who initially doubted her presence could not ignore the impression she made. She was no longer just a guest. She was the heart of the evening, commanding attention not by force, but by the sheer authenticity of her performance. The music continued, and the young woman allowed herself to explore the full range of the piano's voice. Her fingers moved swiftly in some passages, softly in others, creating contrasts that were both subtle and striking. She played with an emotional depth that suggested she was speaking directly to the hearts of everyone in the room. It was not a performance meant to impress the eyes, but one meant to touch the soul. The room seemed to shrink around the piano, the grandeur of the chandeliers and the elegance of the tables fading into the background. All that mattered was the music and the way it connected the people present. Even those who were used to grand social events, the kind where appearances mattered more than substance, found themselves moved in ways they had not anticipated. There was no hierarchy, no business titles, no power dynamics at play, just human emotion shared through the universal language of music. At one point, the young woman paused briefly, letting the notes linger in the air. The silence was as powerful as the music itself. Guests exhaled almost simultaneously, as if collectively holding their breath and then releasing it. There was a sense of reverence in that pause, a recognition that what they were witnessing was extraordinary. Then, almost imperceptibly, she continued, weaving a new melody that carried forward the emotions she had already stirred. As the performance neared its peak, the energy in the room shifted again. The music had become richer, fuller, more expansive. Guests who had been quietly listening now felt their hearts lift, their spirits touched by the combination of skill, emotion, and humility. Some smiled softly, some closed their eyes, and some simply sat in awe, unable to articulate the feelings that had been awakened within them. The CEO watched closely, his pride quiet but undeniable. He had known her potential, but seeing it realized in front of a room full of strangers was a different kind of satisfaction. He observed the effect on the guests, noting how even the most stoic faces had softened, how conversations had ceased, and how attention had been fully captured by her presence and talent. It was a moment of recognition, not just for her abilities, but for the authenticity and sincerity that she brought to every note. Finally, the young woman approached the final section of the piece. Her fingers moved with precision and grace, bringing the music to a gentle yet powerful conclusion. The last note lingered, resonating in the air like a soft echo that seemed to settle over the entire room. The guests remained silent for a heartbeat longer, savoring the final sound before realizing the performance had ended. Then, slowly, applause began to rise, starting as tentative claps and building into a wave of appreciation that filled the ballroom. The young woman rose from the piano, her expression calm and humble. She offered a small bow, acknowledging the audience without seeking the spotlight. The guests continued to clap, some standing, some whispering words of admiration and amazement. The energy in the room had shifted completely. What had begun as curiosity and skepticism had transformed into admiration and respect. The young woman had not only played the piano, she had silenced the chatter, captured hearts, and left a lasting impression that no one would forget. Even as the applause echoed around the room, the young woman remained composed. She didn't let the attention overwhelm her. Her eyes met the CEO's briefly, and he offered a small smile of pride and acknowledgement. In that quiet exchange, no words were needed. The performance had spoken for itself, touching everyone present in a way that transcended social status, business titles, and expectations. It was a moment of shared humanity, of genuine emotion, and of unexpected brilliance that would be remembered long after the night ended. The room was still buzzing from the initial applause, yet the young woman remained composed, letting the last note linger in the minds of everyone present. Guests exchanged amazed glances, whispering quietly about the performance they had just witnessed. They had expected a typical evening with light entertainment, but what they experienced was something entirely different. The music had filled the room, not just in sound but in feeling, touching people in a way that words alone could never reach. Some guests found themselves looking at her differently now. The quiet, reserved guest who had seemed almost invisible at the beginning of the evening had become the center of attention, commanding respect and admiration without a single word spoken. Even those who were usually competitive or dismissive felt an unexplainable warmth and curiosity. They wondered about her story, her training, and the life experiences that shaped her ability to express so much through music. The CEO watched her closely, a calm smile playing on his lips. He had known her potential long before anyone else had, but seeing it unfold in this setting brought a unique satisfaction. It wasn't just the technical skill. It was the authenticity, the ability to connect with an audience in such a personal and profound way. He could see the subtle effect she had on people, the way they leaned in, how their eyes softened, and how their conversations had paused, all in response to her music. She remained at the piano, allowing the room to absorb the impact of her performance. She didn't rush away or seek praise. Her humility was as evident as her talent, and it added to the aura she carried. Guests felt drawn not just to her music but to her presence, a rare combination of skill and sincerity that left a lasting impression. Some quietly approached to express their admiration, but she responded with gentle nods and modest smiles, never making anyone feel inferior for their curiosity or awe. As she sat there, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Years of practice, countless hours of dedication, and moments of doubt and triumph had all led to this evening. She felt a quiet satisfaction, not from the applause but from the knowledge that her music had reached people in a meaningful way. Each note had been a piece of her story, shared with strangers who were now part of that moment with her. Guests began to circulate around the room again, but this time their conversations were different. The casual small talk had transformed into discussions about the performance, her talent, and the emotion she had conveyed. People who had previously been focused on networking now found themselves reflecting on something more human, something genuine. The atmosphere had shifted from a typical corporate gathering to an experience that felt personal and memorable. Some guests approached her to speak, asking questions about her training and background. She answered simply and honestly, never exaggerating her experiences or achievements. Her humility was striking, making her even more relatable and admirable. She spoke about her love for music, the hours of practice she had devoted, and the joy she found in sharing it with others. There was no pretension, only authenticity, and it resonated with everyone who listened. The CEO noticed how the interactions were unfolding and felt a quiet pride. He had introduced her to this environment not just to showcase her talent, but to allow her to connect with people in her own way. Watching her navigate the attention with grace, he realized that she had done more than just perform. She had inspired, captivated, and reminded everyone present of the beauty of genuine expression. There was a sense of fulfillment that came from witnessing someone you believed in shine without losing their authenticity. As the evening progressed, the young woman began to mingle with the guests, though still quietly and respectfully. People were drawn to her presence, seeking conversations not just about music but about life, passion, and dedication. They found her insights thoughtful and her perspective refreshing. In a room full of formalities and expectations, she offered a breath of sincerity and calm, a reminder that human connection could be powerful and uncomplicated. Some of the guests who had initially been skeptical became her biggest admirers. They admired her not only for her skill but for her ability to remain grounded in the midst of attention. She did not seek validation, yet she earned it effortlessly. Her example quietly encouraged others to value humility and authenticity, showing that true impact did not require showiness or pretense. Meanwhile, the piano itself seemed to have gained a new life. It had become more than an instrument. It was a vessel for emotion, a bridge between her inner world and the audience. Every touch of the keys, every subtle nuance of her movements conveyed stories and feelings that transcended language. Guests found themselves remembering moments from their own lives, feeling emotions they hadn't anticipated, all because of the simple yet profound way she expressed herself through music. Some children present at the event, often restless and distracted, had become quietly attentive, their eyes wide with wonder. Even they could feel the magic in the performance, the way music could speak to people of all ages. Adults noticed their reactions, exchanging smiles of surprise and admiration. It was a shared experience that crossed generations, social standings, and professional backgrounds, uniting everyone in a moment of genuine human connection. The young woman eventually returned to her seat at the table, but the energy she had created lingered. Conversations continued, but now they were filled with a sense of warmth and reflection. People spoke more openly, smiled more sincerely, and seemed to carry a newfound appreciation for the simple yet powerful beauty of talent, combined with humility. Her performance had left a lasting mark, not just as entertainment, but as a meaningful human experience. Throughout the evening, she continued to interact quietly with guests, offering gentle smiles and thoughtful responses. She did not dominate the spotlight, but her influence was undeniable. People remembered her presence, the way she had captivated the room, and the emotions she had stirred. The effect was subtle yet profound, demonstrating the power of authenticity and sincere expression. The CEO observed the entire scene with a quiet satisfaction. He had brought her as a guest, but she had become the heart of the evening. He recognized the impact she had made on everyone, the way she had transformed the atmosphere, and the genuine admiration she had inspired. It was a testament not only to her talent, but to her character, her humility, and her ability to connect deeply with others. By the end of the evening, guests left the ballroom talking about her performance and the impression she had made. They recounted the way she had played, the emotions she had conveyed, and the authenticity she had brought to the event. Some made a point of expressing their gratitude to the CEO for introducing such a remarkable guest, while others quietly reflected on how rare it was to encounter someone who could so effortlessly blend talent, humility, and genuine human connection. The young woman herself felt a quiet contentment. She had shared her music, touched the hearts of many, and remained true to herself throughout the experience. She didn't seek recognition, yet she had earned it, not through words or attention-seeking gestures, but through the sincere expression of her art. The evening had become memorable, not for its luxury or formality, but for the shared experience of something real and heartfelt. As the lights dimmed and guests began to leave, there was a lingering sense of admiration and reflection. People remembered the calm presence, the gentle smile, and the music that had silenced the chatter and captured their hearts. The young woman had achieved something rare. She had transformed a formal gathering into an unforgettable human experience, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. And as she walked quietly alongside the CEO toward the exit, there was an unspoken understanding that the night had been changed forever by her presence and talent. As the evening drew to a close, the ballroom still hummed with the echoes of her performance. Guests were leaving, but their conversations were no longer about business deals or social appearances. Instead, people spoke quietly about the young woman, the piano, and the music that had captivated them all. Some lingered by the piano, tracing the polished keys with their eyes, remembering each note and the emotions it had stirred within them. The atmosphere was filled with a sense of wonder and reflection, a rare feeling at such an event. The young woman stood quietly near the exit, her posture calm and composed. She had experienced countless performances in the past, yet this evening was unique. It was not just about playing the piano. It was about connecting with a room full of strangers in a meaningful way. She felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her music had touched hearts and created a shared moment of humanity. She glanced at the CEO, who stood a short distance away, his expression one of quiet pride and understanding. He had known she was remarkable, but seeing the effect she had on everyone present brought a deep, unspoken joy. As guests passed by to offer their personal thanks and admiration, she received them with gentle nods and warm smiles. Some expressed surprise at the depth of her skill and the authenticity she conveyed. Others shared how her music had reminded them of personal memories, evoking emotions they had not expected to feel at a corporate gathering. She listened attentively, responding with modest words, never allowing the attention to overshadow the essence of what she had shared. Her humility added to the impression she left, making the admiration she received feel earned rather than demanded. The CEO approached her again, this time speaking quietly so only she could hear. He commended her not just for her talent but for the way she had carried herself throughout the evening. He mentioned the subtle impact she had on the guests, how she had shifted the mood of the room and captured the attention of even the most skeptical attendees. She nodded, acknowledging his words with quiet gratitude, feeling the same sense of fulfillment he expressed. There was no need for further praise. The shared understanding between them was enough. Guests continued to leave, some pausing for one last glance at the young woman. Their curiosity mingled with admiration. They felt they had witnessed something special, a rare moment when art and authenticity combined to create a lasting impression. Even those who had attended numerous high-profile events admitted quietly to each other that this evening would remain in their memories. They recognized the young woman not only as a talented pianist but as a person who had quietly reminded them of the power of sincerity and passion. In the quieter corners of the room, conversations shifted from casual networking to reflection. People discussed the emotions her music had evoked, the subtle strength in her presence, and the way she had managed to inspire without a word beyond her performance. Some speculated about her life, her experiences, and the dedication it must have taken to reach such a level of skill and confidence. Others simply reflected on the beauty of what they had witnessed, feeling a sense of gratitude for being part of that shared experience. As the room emptied, the young woman walked slowly toward the piano once more. She ran her fingers lightly across the keys, appreciating the instrument that had carried her music and allowed her to connect with so many people in such a profound way. There was a quiet reverence in her movements, a recognition of the moment and its significance. She didn't play again. She simply touched the keys, acknowledging the evening and the impact it had created. The room, now mostly empty, felt serene and filled with the lingering memory of her performance. The CEO observed her from a distance, aware of the impression she had left on everyone present. He knew that what she had accomplished went beyond the music itself. She had transformed the evening, turning a formal gathering into a moment of genuine human connection. Her talent, combined with her humility and quiet confidence, had created an atmosphere that was unforgettable. He felt proud not only of her skill but of the person she was and the way she had shared herself with the world. As the last guests departed, the young woman and the CEO walked together through the grand hallways of the hotel. The soft lighting reflected on the polished floors, creating a sense of calm and closure after the evening's excitement. They didn't need to speak much. The sense of accomplishment and shared understanding was enough. She felt a quiet happiness, not from applause or recognition, but from knowing that she had connected with people in a sincere and meaningful way. Later, after leaving the hotel, the young woman reflected on the evening in her mind. She thought about the guests, their reactions, and the emotions that had been shared through her music. She realized that her performance had been more than an expression of talent. It had been a bridge between her inner world and the hearts of strangers. Each note she played had carried a piece of her story, and in return, she had received the unspoken stories of those who listened. It was a mutual exchange, a rare and valuable human experience that left her feeling fulfilled and grateful. The CEO, walking beside her, spoke quietly about the importance of authenticity and the rare quality she had shown. He emphasized that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of skill, sincerity, and humility that made her stand out. She listened thoughtfully, acknowledging his words and reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this moment. It was a quiet, meaningful conversation, one that reinforced the significance of what had unfolded during the evening. In the days that followed, the story of the young woman's performance spread among the guests and their circles. People shared their experiences, recounting the emotions they had felt and the impression she had made. Some reached out personally, expressing their admiration and curiosity about her life and music. She responded with the same humility and warmth she had shown during the event, never exaggerating her achievements, and always focusing on the joy of sharing her passion. The performance became a memorable part of the company's history, not for its extravagance or the celebrity presence, but for the genuine human connection it had created. The young woman's influence extended beyond the music. She had inspired people to appreciate authenticity, to value humility, and to recognize the power of shared experiences. Even those who initially doubted her impact acknowledged that she had left a lasting impression, one that would be remembered long after the evening ended. Through it all, the young woman remained grounded. She understood the significance of the evening but did not let it define her. Her focus continued to be on the music, on the joy of sharing it, and on the human connections that it facilitated. She knew that her talent was a gift, and her responsibility was to use it meaningfully. The evening had been a reminder of the power of her craft, and the impact of sincerity and authenticity. In the quiet moments after the event, she thought about the subtle transformations she had witnessed. The guests, once preoccupied with appearances and business, had experienced a shift toward reflection, admiration, and emotional connection. It was a reminder that even in formal, structured settings, human emotion and genuine expression could create moments of beauty and meaning. She felt grateful to have been the catalyst for that change, not seeking recognition but finding fulfillment in the shared human experience. The CEO, too, reflected on the evening with satisfaction. He had invited her as a guest, perhaps expecting a pleasant contribution to the event, but what she had achieved far exceeded his expectations. Her music had silenced the chatter, captured the attention of the room, and left an indelible mark on everyone present. He recognized the rare quality she possessed, not just talent, but a combination of humility, grace, and the ability to connect deeply with people. It was a moment he would remember for a long time. As they parted ways that night, there was an unspoken understanding between them. The young woman had shared a part of herself, leaving a profound impression on the guests and on the CEO. The evening had been transformed from a standard corporate gathering into an unforgettable experience, one defined by human emotion, talent, and authenticity. The story of her piano performance would linger in the memories of all who witnessed it, a testament to the quiet power of sincerity and passion. In the weeks that followed, the impact of the evening continued to resonate. Guests spoke of it in meetings, social gatherings, and personal conversations, recalling the moment the music filled the room and captivated their hearts. The young woman's performance became a symbol of the difference one individual could make through authenticity and skill. People remembered not just the notes she played, but the calm, sincere presence she had brought to the room. Her influence extended far beyond the immediate audience, leaving a lasting impression that inspired reflection and admiration. Through it all, she remained true to herself. She continued to practice, perform, and share her music, never losing the humility and grace that had made her so remarkable. The evening at the CEO's party had been a milestone, a moment of recognition and connection, but it did not change her essence. She remained focused on the joy of music and the human connections it fostered, understanding that her gift was not for self-promotion, but for sharing beauty, emotion, and authenticity with others. And so, the story of that remarkable night lived on, not in grand announcements or formal accolades, but in the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed it. The young woman had brought something rare and unforgettable to the event, a reminder that talent, combined with humility and sincerity, could create moments of genuine human connection. The CEO's decision to bring her as a guest had resulted in a night that would be remembered not for its formality, but for the quiet, profound beauty of her piano performance and the lasting impression it left on everyone present.